And I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit and the great chain in his hand. And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years, and cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled. And after that he must be loosed a little season. And I saw thrones, and they sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them. And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Jesus and for the word of God, and which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither had received his mark upon their foreheads or in their hands. And they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. But the rest of the dead lived not again until the 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection. Blessed and holy is he that hath part in the first resurrection. On such the second death hath no power, but they shall be priests of God and of Christ, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. And when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison, and shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. And they went up on the breadth of the earth, and compassed the camp of the saints about, and the beloved city. And fire came down from God out of heaven, and devoured them. And the devil that deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and shall be tormented day and night forever and ever. And I saw a great white throne, and him that sat on it, from whose face the earth and the heaven fled away, and there was found no place for them. And I saw the dead, small and great, stand before God. And the books were opened. And another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged out of those things which were written in the books, according to their works. And the sea gave up the dead which were in it. And death and hell delivered up the dead which were in them. And they were judged every man according to their works. And death and hell were cast into the lake of fire. This is the second death. And whosoever was not found written in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire.
6 times John repeats this phrase, 1,000 years, or the 1,000 years. And this is to emphasize something very important to his readers. I want to quote to you a very old and respected scholar, Charles d'Albus, who was a French reformer who went to England and joined the Church of England. He lived from 1673 to 1717 and was well known for his book Perpetual Commentary on the Revelation. And I want to quote him by way of Dr. George Bush in his book Treatise on the Millennium, pages 26 and 27. D'Albus, by far the ablest of all commentators on the visions of John, thus speaks of the origin of the apocalyptic millennium. It may be observed that as the Jewish church had no absolute rest or sabbatism as the millennium is, so the Holy Ghost could not yet derive the symbol from that economy, but was, as it were, obliged to draw it from a higher fountain, or original of ideal types and events. But, however, even this original idea was known to the Jews. They had a tradition of it, and the notion was current even before St. John wrote. He has not then treated of the millennium as a new thing, but has described it in some measure by the old notions with improvements. And besides that, showed us how it is accomplished by Christ, by giving us a full account of all the antecedents and consequence. Now that tradition was grounded upon the allegorical exposition of the creation of the world in 6 days, and the rest of God in the 7th, and that 1,000 years are with God as 1 day. Whence it is argued that, as God created the world in 6 days and rested on the 7th, so he will redeem mankind and work out their redemption in 6,000 years, and procure his and their sabbatism in the 7,000. This rest being to be proportionable to the duration of the work. By consequence, that term of 1,000 years is to be taken in a literal sense, and must consist just of 1,000 years in the common acceptation of the word, and needs no further evolution, as some of late have pretended, because it is fixed by that traditional allegory. Now that the Jews had it must be plain from this, that we find it in St. Barnabas, who wrote before St. John many years. And indeed we give very good reasons in our commentary to think that the notion is as old as the deluge, because we find it pretty plainly to be also the tradition of the Chaldean Magi, and perhaps too of the Egyptians. And that's Dalbus in the Perpetual Commentary on the Revelation, page 64. Now I want to draw your attention to a couple parts here. First of all, this. They, that's the Jews, they had a tradition of it, and the notion was current even before St. John wrote. He has not then treated of the millennium as a new thing, but has described it in some measure by the old notions with improvements. Now what he's saying here is that John is absolutely, intentionally referring to the Jewish concept of the kingdom. And look at this quote over here. Now that the Jews had it must be plain from this, that we find it in St. Barnabas, who wrote before St. John many years. Now this is an interesting argument here, because there are some scholars who think the Epistle of Barnabas was written about AD. That's 80 AD. And that would in fact place it before the apocalypse. So that's an interesting argument there from Dalbus. Personally, I don't agree. I think the Epistle of Barnabas was written about AD 100, but I see his argument here. It's interesting. Doesn't change anything, though. John was referring to an existing concept. That's what's important here, okay? Now, Dalbus says something very important right up here. Take a look at this. By consequence, that term of 1,000 years is to be taken in a literal sense and must consist just of 1,000 years in the common acceptation of the word, and needs no further evolution, as some of late have pretended, because it is fixed by that traditional allegory. What he's saying here is that since we know that John was drawing from a Jewish concept, you can't just come along and say some bogus nonsense like, he just means cattle on 1,000 hills there. That would be silliness. That would be an uninformed, stupid idea. Now, Dalbus is correct that when John uses it this way, the 1,000 years, referring back to the Jewish tradition, this is absolutely correct. You have to take it that way. It refers to 1,000 years, and it refers to the Jewish kingdom and so forth. But I've seen people referring to this verse as though the reason John's saying 1,000 years over and over again is to inform us that the kingdom age is 1,000 years long. And that's not why John refers to it. The duration of the kingdom age, friends, is not something that matters very much. How long the kingdom age is, it's only given here in Revelation 20. It's really not all that important if you think about it. But when John repeats it over and over here in Revelation 20, it's because he is telling his audience he's referring to the Jewish kingdom. It doesn't matter if it's 1,000 years long. That's not the point. It's the Jewish kingdom that's the point. So when our Gnostic friends tell us they refuse to believe Jewish fables, and when they like to pretend they don't see premillennialism in Revelation 20, we need to remind them that John went out of his way to teach us that the Jewish kingdom is coming. So Gnostics are completely without excuse. And that's you amillennialists out there.